I do not believe that I am a photographer. I mean, this is just sort of a, part of my life that it's so interesting. These photographs span from about 2007, which I believe is when the first iPhone came out, to the present. So a lot of these photos in the early timeline were just taken because I was too lazy to text. Where are you? And I would take a picture of a sandwich I'm eating. Or, it was basically location services. It was because I travel, as a musician, I'm traveling with a large group of people a lot of the year, much more so back in the later aughts, when a lot of the stuff was taken. And so it was really a communication tool. I was never taking photographs in a fine arts sense, or even as in a documentarian way. I was just, here I am, or hey, there's a guy throwing up on the corner. I have a phone. Never. I didn't have a grand plan at all. And when I was 8 years old, I got a guitar for Christmas, and that Christmas, my best friend also got a guitar. And so I immediately had someone to kind of learn how to play music with. And we started writing songs at 8 and 9 years old. And it's just kind of, we were Beatles kids. Both of us had parents who were relatively esoteric and arty with good record collections. And so we had that advantage of always having music in the house. But yeah, that's just kind of how it started. And it's funny, there is a picture in the book, and this is part of the shtick of this book. There's a picture that I took in 1975 of my first electric guitar and amp in that book. And I got around the rules by taking a picture of the picture with my iPhone. So it's still a picture I took with my iPhone. It was guitar, and I wound up playing bass in my first band that made records by default because they already had a guitar player. And I had never played bass until the day I went to join the band. I was very lucky to have started my music career at a point where basically American hardcore music was starting. And so I was in a band called Minor Threat, which was one of the first group of American punk bands that managed to tour across the country. And I started when I was 15, which was, it was really cool, but also I didn't have to drive because I was so young, which was a nice bonus. And so that my first band is kind of what set the tone into other subsequent bands that had touring status. And I went through, as I aged, I kind of kept going up the ladder, but I was in my 30s before I realized that this is what I did for a living. This was just what I did. It was really more of a job, a way to avoid work than to think of it as a job. And I skipped through a number of bands that of some significance, the Minor Threat, and then a band called Dag Nasty, which realized that no one was thinking about this as a long-term pursuit. This was essentially a band that I went to practice after school. And so the low expectations, I think, might have something to do with why it wound up having a lasting legacy. And Minor Threat wound up, it was a short period of time. The band existed on and off from 1980 until 1983. We put out a limited amount of records. By breaking up in 1983 and never reforming, we ensured that we didn't destroy the legacy by, going out in wheelchairs and trying to recapture something that was simply lightning in a bottle and a product of its time. And also Ian MacKaye is not only a great musician, but he was very concerned and interested in building community, and especially in DC. And I think Minor Threat is also known. One of our songs was a song called Straight Edge, which was one of 8 songs on our first EP, but it was a song saying, hey, life's a lot easier if you're not drunk and on drugs all the time. And this term straight edge, I think people who may have no idea about punk rock or Minor Threat are familiar with that term. And it basically is a, shorthand for sobriety or a sober lifestyle. And so Minor Threat coined that phrase and has been associated with that. Even though at the time, I think the drummer probably smoked pot occasionally. It wasn't a militant stance. It was just one of a group of songs that were all in that style of early hardcore, personal politics. one of the high points of Dag Nasty is that Travis Barker from Blink-182 has a title of a Dag Nasty song tattooed on his chest. So, you know, that's really the high mark of my career. I'm joking, it's not, but he's a nice fella. And a couple of other bands, but Bad Religion is the one that I've been in for the longest time, and that's the one I'm in now that I think I'm best known for. Because I was not thinking about compiling a traditional rock and roll book at any point. My photographs have tended to be more of you know, found objects and things that I see off the stage and away from, you know, hey, here's another deli tray. Like, I didn't really take pictures of that. But there are some pictures. One of my favorite rock and roll based pictures in the book is it's of our bass player, Jay Bentley, who is an incredibly handsome man, I must say. And you can tell in this photograph. And it's a picture of him backstage at a festival in France called Hellfest. And we were playing this festival with ZZ Top and Motley Crue and a number of other kind of these big rock and roll bands. I guess Hellfest, you know, accepts all comers. And I have a photograph of Jay holding Dusty Hill's big white fur bass from the famous ZZ Top video where they have the matching furry basses. And he has this look on his face of like, you know, hey, what bass? What is this? But it was just the right picture at the right time. And I had to, you know, of course I had to include that because you don't see a furry bass that often. And there's some other, you know, another rock friendly one. There is a photograph I especially like that I took later on. This was one that I took only last year when I knew there was going to be a book at this point. So I would have to say that I started to not walk by photographs that I was just leaving. You know, I would, if I saw something interesting, I would walk a couple blocks and then turn around and go like, oh, you should probably take this picture, and not just walk by it like I would for the first 20 years. But this was one I was excited about because we were on tour. We were going on tour with a band called Social Distortion, and I'm very good friends with their guitar player, Johnny Two Bags, and he collects old guitars, as do I, as is the other guitarist in Bad Religion, Mike Dimkich. And we all collect the same kind of old guitars from the 50s. And I had an opportunity, okay, when we go on this tour, I'm going to get all of our old guitars and I'm going to take a picture of this, you know, incredible pile of wood. And I got to do that. Like the third day, there was a shipping pallet and we got all the old guitars and just kind of stacked them up like firewood. And the youngest guitar there is from 1959. So it's a really cool picture. And if you're a guitar aficionado, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe they've piled these vintage guitars up, you know, like cordwood. But of course, we were pretty careful about it. And they're all beat up anyway. But it's just a striking image. And also it just represents the friendship of myself and Johnny and Michael. So it's a good picture. I've been really fortunate to get to play in some pretty interesting situations. One actually recently that I remembered was I had just, there's a new book about the Cars that just came out. And I can't remember the title right now, but I had just read it. And while I was reading it, I'm like, you know, I'd almost forgotten that I had toured as a member of Rick Ocasek's solo band. And I played on Rick Ocasek's solo record, Troublizing. And this book brought all of these memories of Rick back to me. And just thinking like, you know, in the 90s, I spent, you know, I was out on the road playing the guitar solo to just what I needed, poorly, with Rick and Greg Hawkes playing keyboards. And it was like, what a surreal world that this punk kid wound up being kind of this, you know, Cars frontman support staff, which was wild. And another one I did, which was pretty cool, was I was taking a break between bands. I'd had a couple of record deals, and I was like, okay, I need to take a breather. I'm going to work in a recording studio. And in about 3 days, this man came into the recording studio, and it was Tommy Stinson from The Replacements. And he was rehearsing with his band Bash and Pop, and an opportunity came for me to get in that band. And I'm like, I want to get in this band because I worship The Replacements. Like, I can't, you know, I was so starstruck and excited that Tommy Stinson wanted me to play guitar in his band that my hiatus turned into about 3 days. And I wound up playing with Bash and Pop for quite a while until actually I joined Bad Religion. So that was kind of another fun, dream come true, like, because the Replacements were just such a huge band for me and so many other people.